Hi, my name is Chris and this is Battle Nonsense. The suppression mechanic is quite a controversial topic since Battlefield 3, because in that game DICE decided that it should be more than just a visual effect. It should also affect how your gun is handling. So once another player fires at you and does not manage to hit you, then your gun no longer works like it normally does, because you are suppressed now. So since the release of Battlefield 3 there have been a lot of changes to the suppression and how it affects the gun mechanics of the suppressed player. In the CTE, DICE made yet another massive rework to this mechanic in an attempt to improve it. And this last change is highly controversial to say the least, because when you get suppressed in the CTE, then this will increase the vertical recoil of your gun, as well as the first shot multiplier, the spread, and you will get weapon sway plus the blur. And it is not a fixed value that is applied here. The strength depends on your suppression level. So if you have learned to control the recoil of your gun under normal circumstances, then this will not help you much once you get suppressed, because depending on the amount of suppression that you receive, you will get a different recoil increase. This means that while you can of course compensate recoil, you now have to deal with an unpredictable amount of recoil, as it's tied to your suppression level. And this means that besides the increased spread and first shot multiplier, you now have yet another random or inconsistent element that is affecting the firefights. But that's not the only change that has been done. When we look at this graphic here from DICE, then we see that the suppression effect is now targeted at longer distance engagements, as it starts in the last section of the fall-off area of the gun. And since every gun has a different maximum distance, this will cause that the suppression distance will be different for every gun. And the amount of suppression damage that one projectile does is based on that distance. So the greater the distance, the higher the suppression value. And not just that, the weapon type also matters. This means that a LMG will do more suppression per bullet than, in example, a PDW. So if this guy here starts to shoot at me with a gun that is not meant to engage players at that distance, then he will be able to suppress me and give my gun higher vertical recoil, a higher first shot multiplier, more spread, weapon sway and the blur effect. If that happens while I engage another player that is closer to me, then I will suddenly have to deal with all those penalties that come in any kind of strength. So it becomes completely unpredictable for me how my gun will handle. And this will work in favor of the player that I am in a firefight with. Now, there are players who say that this is teamwork. And while I can understand why some players see it like that, I cannot agree that this is actual teamwork. What you see here is an attempt to make it easier to kill players. Because once you have some of your team members suppress a player who has better gun control than you have, then by applying those spread, recoil, etc. penalties, you suddenly get a chance to win a one-on-one firefight that you might lose otherwise. You win because this mechanic is able to suddenly change how something as essential as the handling of your gun works. It becomes completely unpredictable as the strength of these penalties increase together with your suppression level. And unpredictable is definitely not what I want to associate with the gunplay in a first-person shooter. Another argument I heard is that the goal of the suppression is to slow down the pace of the game. If that would be the case, then it's not only failing to achieve that, but it's also a bad method to even try to achieve it with. If you want to slow down the pace, then all you need to do is look at the original Battlefield games to find much better ways to do it. Like remove 3D spotting, auto heal, auto repair, infinite sprint, infinite ammo for jets and helicopters, replace the round pool with actual magazine changes and a lot more. All of that is far more efficient for slowing down the pace of the game, and it will add depth to the gameplay that the suppression mechanic cannot do. Then there's the statement that suppression affects the gun mechanics so that the game can simulate the fear of death. This is a statement that does not make any sense to me, because we are playing trained soldiers here. We are playing people who are part of an army. I mean, they surely also do not want to die, but once there are bullets in the air, I would argue that this should actually give you an accuracy boost instead of a penalty, because of the increased adrenaline level in your body caused by the players who fire at you. If you want to simulate the fear of death, then penalties like slower reloads and things like that could be applied once you actually get hit by a bullet. That would make sense if the goal is to simulate the fear of death. But that the spread, recoil, first shot multiplier, weapon sway, etc. is increased once there are a few bullets flying in my general direction, that does not make any sense to me in a video game. But why does DICE even allow suppression to affect the gun mechanics since Battlefield 3? What was the reason for this decision? In my opinion, they did it because one of the goals of Battlefield 3 was to lower the threshold for the new target audience, to always make the player feel that he did something useful, which in some cases means to give him 100 points and a pat on the shoulder for not really achieving anything. So if your aim is not good enough to hit a player, or he is outside the effective range of your gun because you used the wrong gun to engage him, then you cannot decrease his health and you won't get points. Now, to avoid that you feel like you failed or you are not useful, the game lets you damage his suppression state and you get points for not hitting him. The other aspect is that the player you are not able to hit becomes easier to finish off for the other players of your team, as his gun no longer works as expected thanks to the penalties that have been applied by the suppression system. So in my opinion, to have the suppression affect the gun mechanics was not done to add depth to the gameplay, increase teamwork, simulate the fear of death, force you to relocate or slow down the pace. It was done to introduce an unpredictable and random element into the gunfights, to make suppressed players easier to kill, to reward players for engaging enemies with the wrong gun at the wrong distance, and to reward players for not hitting their target. Suppression should be something that happens naturally, and not be enforced by changing how the gun works. This means that if a team wants to hold or lock down a specific area in a game mode like Rush, then they would bring the right tool for that. Like an MG4 with a 200 rounds magazine and a bipod. So if the enemy tries to enter this area that you want to protect, then the players with the LMGs will hold them down. They will suppress them. And I do not mean to just spray and pray. Thanks to the bipod, their LMGs will have next to no recoil, so that they can really rain death on these players with controlled bursts once they try to stick their head out. What these players behind cover should get is a visual and audio effect that tells them that if they peek out behind that cover, then there's a high chance to get murdered. This will force the enemy to reposition and change their tactics. You do not need to mess around with their gun mechanics to get them to do that. So what is the point of a first-person shooter? That's a quite stupid question, right? It's to aim, shoot, hit and kill the enemy players. This is what you are meant to do. This is what your goal is, and that's what you have to get rewarded for, besides playing the objective of course. As long as the suppression is allowed to affect the gun mechanics, it will continue to reward players for missing and choosing the wrong gun. It also creates an imbalance in the gunfights, because in some cases the only reason for you to win the gunfight was because some random player suppressed that guy by spraying and praying at him from outside the effective range of his gun. This has nothing to do with killing a guy because he positioned himself badly, or because he had bad gun control. You only won the gunfight because of that random suppression thing to happen. Without it, you might not have survived that engagement with that player, who might be better than you. Removing the effect that suppression has on the gun mechanics will not make the game easier. I doubt that you would even miss it when it's removed. But what removing this part of the suppression would do is make the gunplay and the firefights more consistent. And that's what a lot of players want when you look at the feedback that DICE gets since Battlefield 3. So since Battlefield 3 there have been a lot of changes to how suppression affects the gun mechanics. But no matter what the developers do, it looks like neither the community nor the developers themselves are happy with how it works, and that's why they keep changing it. I have the feeling that there is someone at DICE who absolutely loves the idea of suppression affecting the gun mechanics, and that's why they try to shoehorn this into the game for several years now. All the time and energy that has been spent on somehow getting this mechanic to work would have been better spent on other aspects of the game. And while in Hardline the suppression gives you gun sway, it at least does not change the spread, first shot multiplier, recoil, etc. So it looks like Visceral has realized that the suppression as it was done in Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 was not exactly a good idea. Now I would just wish for DICE to also come to the same conclusion and stop to force this mechanic into the game and make the gunplay more consistent by leaving it out. I honestly do not understand how anyone wants a mechanic in the game that causes that the behavior of your gun becomes unpredictable. And I really hope that this does not make it into the spring patch. So that is what I think and what I would like to get. Now how about you? What do you want? Let me know in the comments and the topic on Reddit, to which I linked to in the description. If you enjoyed this video, then give it a like, subscribe for more, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, have a nice day and take care. My name is Chris and this was Battle Nonsense.